Welcome back everyone. In this video I'm going to talk about using Flashprint. If you don't have the Ultimaker Cura program that I talked about in the other video, or if you're not using Zortrax 3D printers, you may want to use Flashprint. And Flashprint in particular was designed for FlashForge printers. So if we have FlashForge printers at your location, your school, Flashprint is the software that you're going to want to use. Easiest way to get the software is just Google FlashForge or Flashprint, and you'll find fairly easily on the website, especially if you just search Flashprint, maybe even Flashprint download. It'll take you to this page. You can download the software. It's completely free and you are good to go. Let's take a look at what it looks like. The basic features of Flashprint are very similar to any other slicing software. You're still going to have the same settings in terms of the infill density, the layer heights and things like that, but just the general layout looks a little bit different. So with Flashprint, if you left click and hold, it moves the entire bed around. If you right click and hold, that's how you can pan and change your directions, and using your mouse will zoom in and out. So the first thing that we need to do is get a file. In the previous video I talked about how to export as an STL file. Now we want to open that. So we're going to load a file. I'm going to go find something that I've got that I can 3D print. We'll use an astronaut. So this is a great example because there's a few things going on. Firstly, the astronaut is already orientated upside down, which in this case is actually the best way to print it. But you'll notice it's too big. So the first thing we can do is I can click the model to select it, and you'll notice that it changes color. So when it's selected, it's pretty subtle. It's a slightly lighter yellow. And over here, I've got all my different options. So scale is the one I'm talking about. And I can either scale to certain dimensions, or most of the time, we're just going to scale by a percentage. So I'll keep scrolling until that red line disappears to say it's in the body, it's in the bed, and it's not too big. It does have a feature to say scale to the maximum, and that's the maximum that will fit in the bed. Otherwise, I'll just manually scale based on visual appearance. If I want to move the thing around, FlashForge again is a little bit different, or Flashprint I should say, is it doesn't have the arrows that we saw in the other slicing software. Whereas in this case I can just click and drag and physically move it around. And I can also use just the X, Y, Z to move very specific dimensions. If I know exactly where I need it to be, which is pretty rare, most of the time we'll just click and drag to move it around. Some of the other features, I've got rotate, and in this case it gives me some colored lines. So if I click the blue and drag, it'll show me the angle that I'm rotating if I need to move things around. We've also got, again, we can rotate in every direction. The cut tool is quite useful. So this is in particular if you have a model that's too big to fit on the bed and you want to cut it into different pieces. So what I can do is I can cut from there and I say, all right, I want you to do that, and cut it in the middle. It now splits it. So I could then rearrange this and print two halves on the bed and then just glue them together later. Some of the layout tools are really useful. So if I've got multiple objects, you can use the auto layout and just click OK. And what it will actually do, if I just import something else to show you an example, I should find something small. Base plate. Great. Let's create a copy of that, and then I'm going to auto rotate, and you can see it just puts everything nice and neat. If I had lots and lots of objects, it arranges them with a certain space. I might go, I only want them to be 1 mil apart. You can see they're a bit closer. Supports, again, you can manually play with this stuff, but honestly it does it pretty well for you in a minute when I show you what the settings look like. So I wouldn't necessarily mess around with supports unless you know specifically what you want or specifically you don't want to support. So once you're happy with that, we'll go start slicing, and this will give you all of your options. This homepage, really we don't change anything because this should all be defaulted to what the FlashForge printer wants to use. Just make sure that you have the right printer. So we have the Adventurer 3 Pro 2s. The Adventurer 3 seems to be exactly the same setting, so if you don't have the Pro, that's okay. But Adventurer 3 Pro 2 is the ideal one. So for some reason it won't let me change, but if you haven't selected a printer in the first time you use this, make sure that's the one you're using. If we go into general, this is where we can change some things. The layer height is really how thick every single layer that it prints is going to be. So if I increase this to 0.3, it's going to be much faster to print, but I'm going to lose some detail, particularly if I've got curves. I'll start to see more of that stepped effect rather than a smoother line. If I drop this back to 0.2, which seems to be the Flashprint default, you'll get a balance. It's still reasonably fast print speed, but you get really good detail. And if I wanted heaps and heaps of detail, I could drop back to something like 0.15. It's going to take much longer, but I'm going to have a much nicer print quality. Everything else here we don't really change. This is all more advanced features when you start messing with print speeds. The infill is the other thing. This is what I've talked about previously. It's how solid the object is. So 20% is a pretty good standard for just the average model. You could drop that to like 15 or 10 if you wanted to. Or if you know that it needs to be reasonably strong or really strong, you might up that from anything to 40%, 80%, or if it's really small and you want it to be solid, go 100%. But it's pretty rare to print something 100% solid. It's going to take a long time, use a lot of filament, and generally it's just unnecessary. The next thing is supports. So again, this thing we generally aren't going to change a whole lot. This was pretty defaulted to its settings. The biggest thing that you might want to tweak is the angles. So it's more about what angle will it support, but we'll see that in a minute. The raft, Flashforge or Flashprint defaults to having a raft. And a raft is basically a circle of filament around the outside of the body, and it's designed to increase the filament, the adhesion. So what it often does is it'll create almost like a base on the bed, and then it'll print your model on top of that. It's often really good if you have a model that doesn't have a lot of surface area. So mine, if I didn't have this middle bit here, I probably would print a raft, because sometimes these things don't stick particularly well, and if they peel away halfway through the print, it's going to ruin everything. So often a raft is the safest bet. If you're printing something simple like these little discs that I've got, or something that's got a large amount of surface touching the bed to start with, then you don't need the raft and you can just turn that off. So that might just be a bit of judgment based on what exactly you're printing. Once I'm happy with all those things, I just click slice. It's going to go through its process of analyzing how it's going to print. And then once it's done that, I can look at a preview up here. I can go slice preview, and it's going to show me what it's going to do, and it gives me the time. So it's going to take 8 hours, 50 minutes to print this thing. I can see all the layers. The purple is the rafts that I'm printing. So that's what I was talking about. It'll print that first, then it'll print my models on top of that. And once I'm happy with that, if it's all done and ready to print, I just click save to local, and I would just download this or save this to a USB. I can plug that straight into the Flashforge printer and I'm ready to print. If you want to manually turn off your supports, you can just go clear supports if they've got them. If it doesn't, so if you go back and you look at your preview and you feel like it should have supports, and in this case Flashforge or Flashprint, doesn't generate supports automatically. So here you might look at it and go, hang on, that is kind of overhanging. I don't really see how it's going to print that without a support. What I can do, I can go into my supports, I select my model. This is the overhang angle I was talking about. So here it's saying anything that has an angle of 80 degrees, it's going to create supports. I'm going to drop that way down, just as an example. I wouldn't normally, and then go auto supports. And what it'll do is it'll automatically calculate, is there any points on this that probably need a bit of support? And you can see all the orange that it's now done. So then when I go back and slice, it keeps all my supports there, and I'm ready to print. Otherwise it won't print with supports, and you may have issues with some of the things that you print if they're overhanging without anything underneath them. So slice preview, there we go. You can see the raft in purple, the light greeny blue color is my supports. My model is this weird browny color, and I would then just go save, put it on USB, I can plug it straight into the printer, and I'm good to go. So that's using Flashprint.